Welcome to class. It's homecoming week here at Prairie Grove. Go Tigers. All right, today we're talking about systems, and we've been talking about school discipline this whole time. But when you look at our system, it basically boils down to this. You've got a problem behavior or an issue, and then we deal with it, and there's a consequence. Whether it's corporal punishment, detention, suspensions, expulsion, there's some sort of consequence for this student. Well, then there's an outcome that directly relates and comes from this consequence. There's more missed school time. There's a negative impact on that student. There's more suspensions, and it can possibly lead to prison and other things like that. So when we look at this system, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, who owns the problem? And if I take an honest look in the mirror, it's all of us. We own it. Because at some point in the school, we were a part of this. And so then we look at the system and we say, well, where can we leverage it for change? So before we look at where we can leverage change, I'm going to give you a quick example of a student. A student acts up in the classroom. So the teacher sends them to me with a referral. Well, I look at my handy list, my consequence list, and I say, okay, you got 3 days of ISS. Well, now that leads to more missed school time. Yes, the student's allowed to do work, but he's not getting any instruction. Okay, they're in a different environment. Kids don't like being here. And there's a big issue. Those kids, we see them all the time. They're the repeat offenders. So when I look at this, it's like, well, where can I make a change? And by the time they get to me, yes, I can change the consequence, but the outcomes are usually the same. So the first place I need to look at to leverage change is right here. Well, how do we do that? How do we leverage change at the problem and the behavior issue? The first thing we have to ask ourselves is, why is this occurring? What is the student doing that's causing the action? You know, rarely do we ever have a kid that just goes off on another student or a teacher without some underlying reason. Now, most of the time they don't tell us that reason. Most of the time we don't know that reason. So what do? We just look at our list and we say, okay, you get a 10-day suspension, and we go about our day. Now, this does a few things. The teachers like it because we're supporting them. We're sticking up for our teachers, and we're saying we don't put up with that behavior. And I understand that. And there is some of that we have to do. We do have to support our teachers. But we also, if that's as far as we go, then we don't ever change the system. It just keeps repeating itself. So we also have to look at what's causing it. And the first way we can do that is by asking the student, giving the student a voice in owning the problem. So it's like a kid that comes into my office and he's vaping. And I say, man, you've got to stop vaping. And so I give him the consequence, 3 days of ISS. And a week later, he's in my office again. And I say, you got to stop vaping. And he's in here again. Obviously, what I'm saying is not working. It would just be like if you were a kindergarten teacher or a first grade teacher and you're teaching a kid how to read. Kid can't read, and you go, you need to read better. You need to read better. Well, it's not doing us any good, okay? We actually have to teach that kid. We have to teach him strategies to read better. We have to teach him skills so that he can read better. Well, it's the same thing with our issues. That kid that's getting in trouble, we have to teach them skills that they can use so that they don't repeat the behavior. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that those students' basic needs are being met. Do they have food? Do they have shelter? Do they have a safe place to be? And we've got to make sure that we're taking care of that, because I've seen a lot of kids that are getting in trouble, and it's because certain needs aren't being met. So what can we start? Can we start a backpack program? Can that make a change? Can we start an after-school program where kids have places to go where they feel safe, and they can start to form relationships with other adults that can help them with things? And then we also have to do things that cost us money. We have to have counselors that can actually help these kids, not counselors that just give standardized tests, not counselors that just make sure that the schedules are set and they're in there to make sure that everybody's signed up for the ACT or the SAT. No, we need counselors that can actually help students with problems. We need trauma counselors. We have kids every day that are coming to school with these issues that we're not equipped to deal with. Nobody equipped me to deal with some of the problems I see with our kids. And I've had a lot of schooling, and nobody's ever taught me how to deal with that. We need to have people here to deal with anger management. How can we teach these kids how to deal with their anger? Because we're seeing kids with a lot of anger. Then we also need to bring in people that can teach kids behavior management. Because if kids can't manage their own behavior, they're going to keep coming to me for these consequences, and they're going to keep having these outcomes. We've got to stop the cycle here before we can make any changes here. The other thing that we have to do is we have to make sure we're addressing the real problem and not something else. We have so many kids that vape or are addicted to marijuana or whatever it may be. Well, instead of just giving them a consequence and then another outcome, let's get them the help that they need here. Let's get them into rehab. Let's give them educational things that they can do to learn about the behaviors and how to change the behaviors. I have kids constantly in my office that say, Mr. Davis, I don't want to keep vaping, but I don't know how to stop. And we need to give them access to that, not just keep suspending them for it. And we have kids who are constantly in trouble because of how they talk back to the teacher. Well, you know what? That kid doesn't have a father at home. He doesn't know how to talk back to somebody, an adult, without getting mad or angry. Well, we need to be able to give them the resources to teach them how to do that, and not just a pamphlet for them to read. It needs to be somebody that's talking to them, role-playing it, helping them figure it out. But the issue with all of these things is it costs money. It's not cheap. And it's easier just to say, well, you know what? Let's give them a suspension, because then at least we can tell the community and we can tell our teachers we're dealing with the issue. Well, yeah, I don't want to keep dealing with the issue. I want to fix it here so that eventually I'm rarely dealing with this. When I look at the iceberg, this is what the teachers see. They see the problem. This is what the community sees. And as a principal, I see this as well. I see those kids and their problems when they come in. But this isn't what I need to be worried about. This is where I need to spend most of my time. Because if I can change this, if I can leverage this part of the iceberg, this will change. Me spending my time up here doesn't make many changes. This is where the change occurs. But for the change to occur there, it's going to take a lot of people, and it's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of time. And those are three things that as schools, we have a hard time investing. But we have to say, if we're going to help our kids, if we're going to make a difference here, we've got to be worried about this. We've got to be able to spend the time and the money into more counselors and more programs to help these kids so that they can make the change here, so that we can make the change here.